I never thought that a pair of shoes, just a pair of shoes, could become the target of public humiliation in front of hundreds of people. But that's exactly what happened, in the middle of the lavish wedding of someone I once considered my sister. In a room filled with golden lights, soft music, and expensive wine, I was made the butt of the joke. 'Cause my shoes weren't luxury brands. Because they didn't fit the high-class wedding they were trying to create. I stood there, amidst the giggles, the scrutiny, the malicious whispers. No one spoke up to defend me. No one asked why I had chosen to wear those shoes. They just laughed like I was an outsider, a poor, unworthy person in the perfect picture they were painting. But what they didn't know was, I didn't need their approval. I just needed a chance to give it all back, at the right time, in the right place, and in a way they would never forget. And I did it. Not with harsh words. Not with a fiery confrontation. But with real power. Power that comes from silence, from patience, and from a plan that was nurtured by all the contempt they had for me. A plan that no one expected, that began with the humiliation of a pair of cheap shoes, and ended where they had laughed at me. This is my story. A story of public humiliation, of crushed pride, and of a spectacular comeback that no one, including me, ever imagined. This story is not only a warning to those who tend to judge others by their appearance, but also proof that justice does exist, if you are strong enough to pursue it. Welcome to Twisted Justice, where the despised, betrayed, and humiliated become the protagonists of a journey to turn the tables. On this channel, we tell true stories that delve into justice, revenge, and twists that will keep you glued to the screen. This isn't just entertainment, it's a release from the stifled, a voice for those who have been pushed to the bottom. And if you've ever felt like you don't belong somewhere, been ridiculed, looked down upon, trampled on by people who think they're above you, then today's story is for you. 'Cause I know that feeling. I lived with it all that evening and for months afterward. I still remember the laughter of the woman in the red silk dress, whom I did not know, but who whispered to the person next to her, "Who would bring that to a wedding?" I still remember the look from the groom's father, who had never even greeted me with a kind word, as if I did not deserve to be there. And I remember the numbness in my palms as I clenched my glass, trying to stay calm, trying to act as if it didn't hurt. But it did. And they made a grave mistake in thinking I would forget. The retaliation didn't come right away. Not the next day. Not even a few weeks later. Because I didn't want to rebel the way they expected. I didn't want them to have a reason to continue to despise me. I wanted them to never see it coming. I wanted them to bow out on the same stage they had mocked me on. And I did. You might think this is just a small story, an awkward moment at a big party. But for me, it was a catalyst. A breaking point. A wake-up call for a part of me that had been silently suffering. When you've been hurt by people who had no reason to hurt you, you probably know what it feels like. So stay and hear the whole story. Because I promise you one thing, the response I'm preparing will not only shut them up, but it will also make you, the person watching this video, feel like you've earned some measure of justice for yourself. If you find stories like this worthy of spreading, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on more humane, satisfying twists of twisted justice. My journey is just beginning, and I want you to join me on every twist and turn of fate. I've never been a materialistic person. While the rest of my family flaunted designer handbags, fancy cars, and lavish vacations, I was content with a simple, free-spirited life. But that made me a thorn in their side, especially when I dared to show up to a fancy wedding in shoes that cost less than $30. One pair of shoes ignited a fire of ridicule and contempt, and then became the starting point for an unexpected retaliation. This story begins many years ago, in a family where reputation and image mattered more than true feelings. My family had an unspoken rule. If you're not rich, at least pretend you are. My parents weren't heartless, but they were obsessed with how others perceived them. I grew up in a house filled with colorful parties, with tables overflowing with food but lacking in warmth. People were busy talking business, showing off, comparing, and if you didn't keep up, you were left behind. Like me. As the youngest of 3 children, I was always considered different. I did not choose finance like my eldest brother, nor did I pursue law like my second sister. I chose art, more specifically graphic design and illustration, a career that my family considered fictional and without a future. Even though I signed contracts with several big companies, I was still called the cartoon guy. At every family gathering, I became the target of sarcastic questions. When are you going to get a real job? Can that drawing job support you? I grew accustomed to the silent contempt, but that didn't mean I didn't feel hurt. Every time I sat down at the dinner table with my family, I had to put on a mask of calm. I smiled, I nodded, I pretended that their words didn't touch me. But deep down, I remembered every word, every look. That repression grew over the years, and then the opportunity to respond came in the form of a wedding invitation. It was the wedding of his maternal cousin, named Brandon, whom the whole family admired. Brandon was the model son in the eyes of his elders, an MBA from Wharton, a mid-level executive at a venture capital firm, married to a bride from an equally wealthy and powerful family. Their wedding was held at a luxury beach resort. Invitations were sent out 6 months in advance. Every detail was meticulously planned, from the 5-star menu to the live music, from the cocktail party to the professionally hired bridesmaids. And I, of course, got an invitation. But it was accompanied by whispers from the uncles and aunts. "Are you sure you can afford to buy clothes? Don't go and embarrass your family." I swallowed it all down, nodded and smiled. I'm not rich, but I'm not poor either. I work hard, save money, and live comfortably in a small rented apartment in Brooklyn. But I never spend thousands of dollars on clothes, let alone on a pair of shoes I'll only wear once. I wear old suits, tailored to my exact measurements, and simple leather shoes I buy from a local store. No big name brands. No price tags. But clean, well-made, and appropriate. I showed up at the wedding with a confident smile. I thought I was well prepared. But I forgot, in their eyes I was never enough. From the moment I stepped into the main hall, I felt the appraising gaze. First, the lingering glances at my feet. Then the whispers mixed with laughter. A relative pulled me aside and said, half-jokingly, "Oh, you went to the wrong funeral? Look at those shoes." Teasing continued into the main banquet. An uncle stood up and raised his glass, his eyes fixed on me. To the groom never having to choose between love and a pair of $20 shoes like my cousin. The table erupted in laughter. I pursed my lips, my heart pounding. For a moment, I wanted to walk away. But I sat back. I looked at them, each one of them, and I understood. This was no longer about a pair of shoes. This was an insult to a process. A slap in the face to everything I had worked to build. And I vowed, right then and there, that I would not just sit there. I could not make them respect me with words. But perhaps I could make them bow their heads with actions. After the wedding, I started keeping tabs on the venue, a popular resort that was looking for a new owner to expand its event planning arm. I kept quiet, not telling anyone in the family. But inside, I began to formulate a plan. A plan to get back at them not with anger, but with what they would understand best, power and money. The story began not at that lavish wedding, but many years ago in simple rooms, simple meals, where I learned to appreciate every penny, every pair of shoes I had. I was an ordinary worker, no fame, no huge fortune, and no one who stood out in the eyes of those who lived in luxury. But I had self-respect, gratitude, and a heart that never succumbed to contempt. And then, fate brought me to that wedding where all the fires that had been smoldering in my heart for years were fueled. It was the wedding of an old friend, someone I had helped a lot when I was in college. Her name was Claire, a lovely, lively person who had shared with me her dreams, her poverty, and her desire to rise up. When she announced that her wedding would take place at a famous resort, with a guest list full of powerful people, I hesitated. But then she said, "I can't imagine the wedding without you." So I agreed. I couldn't compare to the others there. They wore designer suits, shiny Italian leather shoes, diamond watches. As for me, I chose the most formal suit I had and the cheap leather shoes I bought in the winter sale. They weren't new, they had a few scuffs, but they were clean. I walked into the ceremony with pride in my heart, thinking that kindness and goodwill would be enough to make me welcome. But I was wrong. It all started with the eyes. The eyes of the women sitting at the table to my left, glancing down at my feet and giggling. Then the whispers of two men standing near the buffet table. Did he walk into this wedding by mistake? Look at his shoes, they look like they came straight from the warehouse. I heard it all. Claire saw me, walked over with a forced smile, and immediately led me to a table at the end of the hall, away from the people she knew. It's quieter here, she said, avoiding my eyes. I understood. She was embarrassed by me. I tried to smile, nodded as if I thought the quiet was good too. But inside, little stabs began to cut through my trust. The bride I had once trusted, who had shared bread with me during my college years, now saw me as an irrelevant part of her perfect picture. I was shoved into a corner among strangers, no one bothered to talk to me. When it came to the dancing, I sat quietly. Everyone was laughing, dancing under the lights, while I sat alone. A man I later learned was the groom's cousin came to my table, poured me a drink, and said, "You've come to the wrong event. Or is this the first time you've seen a dance floor that isn't cement?" Everyone around burst into laughter. I smiled. A smile that I didn't even recognize. It wasn't a polite smile. It was the smile of someone who had been pushed to the limit. I stood up, said goodbye to Claire, and walked out. But that night, I didn't sleep. I remembered everything. The times I lent Claire money for food when she was broke, the times I helped her with her CV, connected with her first employer, encouraged her to pass her final exam. I didn't do it because I expected anything in return. But I also didn't expect that what I got in return was only humiliation because of a pair of shoes that didn't match my class. The next morning, I went back to that resort, not to argue but to ask to buy it. They refused because someone else had already rented it long-term. I did some research and found out it was a chain of wedding venues invested by the groom's family. They rented it long-term from the previous owner to operate as a high-end wedding venue. So I had a new target. I started working like crazy. I had a small event and PR startup, not a big one, but I had a reputation. I started working with investors, looking for funding, building a strategy. It took me almost a year, and finally I bought the entire ownership of that wedding venue without an intermediary but directly from the landlord when the lease with the landlord had just expired. I became the new owner. And on the exact day that was exactly 1 year after the wedding, I sent an anonymous invitation to the groom's family. We would like to invite you to inspect the newly upgraded, more modern wedding venue, and especially have an exclusive cooperation policy for longtime organizers. They came. And they were surprised. I walked out to greet them. In new shoes, still not expensive brands, but shoes I chose because I liked them, not because I needed someone's approval. And their faces, especially Claire's, were filled with undisguised bewilderment. "Welcome to the place where I was once despised for my cheap shoes," I said. "Now, please walk on the same ground of contempt that you thought would forever be trampled upon." Everything had changed. But the fire that started that night, a wedding where a man was humiliated for his shoes, was the catalyst that turned everything into a storm. And that was only the beginning of the earthquake. There are moments in life that, though you don't expect them, come like a cold knife cutting away the last layer of patience. That day, the day of the wedding, I thought I was simply a guest. Instead, I became the center of a farce set up to humiliate me. I had put a lot of effort into choosing the right outfit. Not because I wanted to impress, but because I didn't want to be a burden or be seen as disrespectful at such a formal event. I wore a simple but elegant, well-tailored suit. But the shoes were a problem. I chose a pair of old brown leather shoes that my father had left me. They were not expensive branded shoes, but they had great sentimental value to me. While others saw the shoes as cheap, I saw memories and respect for my late father. And perhaps that was why it hurt me even more when they laughed at me for those shoes. As I entered the wedding hall, I could feel the glances from a few guests. But I didn't expect that, just a few minutes later, I would be pulled into the middle of a circle of ridicule. One of the groomsmen, I don't know his name, but he was a close friend of the groom, said loudly. Well, has anyone seen his fairy shoes? Cinderella wouldn't dare wear those. Laughter erupted from several people around. Kept my cool, smiled, and walked on. But the whispers behind my back were like knives stabbing at my self-esteem. What is he wearing? He doesn't even own a pair of decent Oxfords? Who turns up to a wedding looking like they just came out of a thrift store? I could have quietly retreated. I could have ignored it. But no, because what broke me was not the strangers laughing at me, but the person I once considered my own sister, Rachel. The bride that day was my cousin, who had been with me throughout my childhood when my parents died early. We were as close as blood relatives. I thought that if anyone understood the value of these shoes, it would be Rachel. But when she heard the teasing from her friends, instead of stopping her, Rachel covered her mouth and laughed, then added a sentence that I will never forget. Oh, he always had a unique sense of fashion. Especially the retro stuff from a certain decade. It was like the whole room was laughing at me. I stood there, glass of water in hand, and it felt like the ground had fallen away from me. I don't remember exactly how I left the party. I just remember walking straight to my car and driving home in silence. On the way, I cried. Not because I was laughed at, but because I felt betrayed by the person I trusted the most. Rachel had held me when I lost my parents. She had said she would always be there for me like a real sister. And now she stood in the middle of the crowd, laughing along with them, leaving me alone in my humiliation. I was about to cut the relationship off. But a few days later, when I tried to contact her to talk, I got a text from Rachel. "You're so sensitive. Don't make a big deal out of a pair of shoes. This is my happy day." That message was the final trigger. This story, in fact, began much earlier than that. I was always considered the poor relative in my family. Family gatherings, I was always the one who was overlooked, sitting at the edge of the table, or the one who was asked for all sorts of small favors. I didn't complain. I thought they were just busy or that I needed to work harder. But now I understand, they never respected me. I started planning. But not a verbal retaliation. Something bigger. A complete reversal. And here's the first twist. I'm a co-owner of the investment fund behind the real estate company that bought the resort where they held their wedding. Yes, I, the one they laughed at, was the one who contributed financially to buy the entire chain of lakeside restaurants and hotels where they held their party. The deal was completed just 1 month after the wedding. They don't know, not yet, because I don't use my real name on the record. I'm part of an anonymous group of shareholders. But one fine day, I went back there, walked into the lobby, still in the same old shoes, and met the manager. "I want to rebook the entire wedding hall next month," I said. "We need to check the schedule. Actually, this place has been booked by a regular client for next month. It's Rachel and her husband's 1-year wedding anniversary." I smiled. Good. Cancel them. The new owner demands my priority. The manager's eyes widened. After checking the new ownership record, she stiffened. "Excuse me, who are you?" I was the one they laughed at because of a pair of shoes. The news of Rachel's wedding anniversary being canceled spread throughout the family. She called me furious. "What the hell are you doing? Why did you make the reservation for that day?" I simply replied, "You don't like my shoes, so let me give you the floor they're walking on." "What do you mean?" "You're standing on my floor, Rachel. And that party isn't yours anymore." Silent. Through a few seconds, I heard a small sob. I didn't feel happy, but I felt justified. Not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because I had spent my whole life being put down, only to finally learn to stand up, in the very shoes they once mocked. Climax didn't end there. As the day of the wedding approached, I sent them an invitation, the same design as last year's, but instead of the bride and groom's names, it simply read, "Happy birthday to my self-dignity." And attached is a photo of my old shoes placed proudly on the main table. I don't know if they will come, But I sat in the middle of the room that once made me feel humiliated, drank a glass of wine, and smiled. This time, no one laughed at me. I used to think revenge was the stuff of movies, fictional scenarios where good always triumphs in dramatic fashion. But today I'm telling you a true story, where I, the guy who was once laughed at for wearing not fancy enough shoes, turned that humiliation into the foundation for a twisted justice-esque twist. After I took over Rachel's anniversary party venue by buying the entire resort, the first twist left them speechless. But I didn't stop there. No, I have never had enough. Because what I lost wasn't just my honor at a party. It was the trust of my loved ones. And that betrayal can't be brushed away with a superficial apology or a few "don't overdo it" messages. I don't overdo it. I do exactly what they sow, but reap in ways they never expected. Start with silence. After the cancellation of the first anniversary party, Rachel stopped calling me. But the rest of the family was starting to get nervous. There were whispers, strange looks when I showed up at gatherings, and some people even turned their sarcasm back at me. "You seem to be quite invested in revenge." Yeah, but I haven't done anything. Not really. They think buying a party venue is the climax? They ain't seen nothing yet. I don't want to simply make things difficult for them. I want them to understand, feel, and remember the lesson of self-respect, of how they treat people they think are less than them just because of money or unpolished shoes. What you sow, what you reap. Second wedding. The golden opportunity came 6 months later, when Rachel's younger brother, Todd, was getting married. Todd was a carbon copy of his sister, but worse, arrogant, bossy, and had always looked down on me since childhood. He sent the wedding invitation, obviously because he was required to follow the family list and didn't want me to be there. Still, I accepted the invitation with a smile. This time, it's my turn to welcome you. The party was scheduled to take place in a lavish wedding hall at a resort I owned. And this time, I decided not to cancel. I let them hold it. But on a condition that I set up. Sophisticated revenge plan. Still married, but in my scenario. I had someone secretly contact the event company. No cancellation of contract. No change of venue. But I inserted the entire decoration and design system that I chose. Specifically, I changed the main color from the elegant white and gold they had chosen to classic brown, the same tone as the shoes they had mocked. All the backdrops had brown leather details, only they had no idea. The menu was changed at the last minute, no fancy Western dishes. All were simple dishes that I had been criticized for being rustic: braised pork with eggs, broken rice, banana sweet soup, even pate sandwiches. In particular, I required all the waiters to wear the exact same shoes I had been laughed at for. They were not given any explanation as to why, they were simply given instructions by the new manager. Finally, I asked the MC to open the party by saying, "Today we celebrate not only a new love, but also an old lesson. That value is not in how you look, but in how you treat others." Event unfolds, and the humiliation begins. The ceremony took place. Guests entered the hall, began to whisper, "Why is it brown? Why is there no wine?" And when the food was served, things got even stranger. Todd's face began to heat up. But when he saw the waiter's shoes, his eyes darkened. When it was time for the opening speech, the MC stepped onto the stage. His words, just as I had requested, silenced the entire room. Today is not only a start for the couple, but also a reminder. If you ever laugh at someone's shoes, make sure you don't have to stand on their floor. Todd paled. Rachel turned to her husband. And some of the guests caught on. The whispers turned to giggles. People who had laughed at me, now they were laughing back in the middle of a crowd in the middle of the big day. I walked in like an uninvited guest of honor. I didn't plan on showing up. But at that moment, I changed my clothes, put on my old shoes, and walked into the middle of the wedding ceremony. All eyes were on me. And I just smiled, nodded to the groom, and headed straight to the bar. Todd rushed over. "What the hell are you doing here?" I looked at him calmly. "I just came to attend the wedding held at my property." "Is that okay?" Rachel interjected. Don't you think this is too much? I turned to her. Better than laughing at someone for their shoes in the middle of a wedding? Rachel was speechless. You planned all this? You're crazy, Todd growled. I gently put the glass of wine down on the table and replied, No. I just mirror what you guys did. Only I use your stage to do it. And I don't have to lie or put anyone down. Consequence, a blow to honor. Party was a disaster. Todd stormed out after a heated argument with the event planner. Rachel called my mom, hoping she could intervene, but all my mom said was, He's a grown man. Deal with those who hurt him. The news spread throughout my family. For the first time, they looked at me differently, no longer as a poor little brother, but as someone with real power, courage, and a good memory. No one dared to invite me to just for show parties anymore. On the contrary, they started to be cautious, respectful, and kind, just like I wanted. No need for fake love. Just to let them know that I was no longer a pushover. Finally, I returned to the old room. I still have the small room where I lived as a child. The old shoes are placed in a glass cabinet, but now they are not just a keepsake of my father, but a symbol of quiet subversion, where a pair of unpolished shoes can make an entire family bow. Because I understand, revenge doesn't need to be noisy. It just needs to be at the right time, right place, and right person. The story began with a laugh. A sneer, spreading from the wedding table like a hollow echo in the heart of the person being pointed at. People close to me, who seemed to be family, looked down on me, just because the shoes weren't expensive enough. And it ended also with a laugh, but this time I had the last laugh. Not because I won the game of honor, but because I learned the most important thing, that those who judge others from the outside are always the most empty inside. And when we have the patience to not be them, we will see ourselves more clearly than ever. I thought I won until I understood what winning meant. After Todd's wedding ended in confusion and humiliation, I didn't feel as elated as I had imagined. There were no fireworks, no victory lights. I just felt empty. Winning doesn't make me feel any better. It makes me see clearly what I really want, not revenge, but recognition. And when I achieve it by putting others down, I wonder, am I any different than they were when they mocked me? That's when I started to reflect, sitting with myself in the small room, looking at my old brown leather shoes. The shoes my father left me, legacy or sign of poverty. My father was not rich, but he went to work every day wearing those leather shoes, polishing them carefully, not letting even a corner of the heel crack. He used to say, "Shoes don't have to be expensive, just good enough to help you walk steadily." That quote became my guiding principle. But I forgot it the day I was ridiculed. I let the judgment of others suffocate the pride I once had in those shoes. And that was the real failure. Not letting others look down on me, but letting myself believe that look down. When I used money to fight back, I regained the initiative. But what I needed to regain more than anything was peace of mind. Family, when blood is no longer a shelter. Perhaps what hurts me most isn't the laughter, but who laughed. Rachel, the cousin I once trusted. Todd, the one I gave my snacks to as a kid. And the aunts and uncles who drove me to school. Sometimes we grow up believing that family is unchanging. But I've learned, real family isn't blood, it's the people who never make fun of you for even a second. After the incident, I chose not to cut ties but to keep my distance. I no longer showed up to gatherings as a default. I only showed up when I knew I was invited out of respect, not obligation. I met Rachel again, not to forgive but to be frank. One day Rachel called me. She asked me out for coffee. No embellishments. No excuses. She simply said, "I was wrong. I was young and stupid. But you made me look at myself, even though it hurt." I didn't smile. I didn't answer right away. But I saw something real in her eyes, not fear but understanding. Her pain at her brother's wedding, it was the pain I had felt, and she tasted it because of me. I just said, "I don't hate you. I just can't forget the feeling when people looked at me like I was a fool." Rachel nodded. I understand. And if possible, I hope I don't ask for forgiveness, just an admission that I hurt you. For the first time, I saw Rachel not as the haughty older sister, but as a human being relearning the lesson she had missed when she laughed at my shoes. Since then, I no longer wear the cloak of revenge. I used to dream of the day when people would look up to me and realize they were wrong. But now that they have, I realize being misunderstood is not as bad as losing your identity in the process of proving otherwise. I stopped trying to make them see. I did it for me. Not to get even, but to live the life I deserved. The shoes are back, this time not to impress. A year after Todd's wedding, I was invited to be a guest speaker at a conference on entrepreneurship and overcoming stereotypes. I stepped onto the stage. On my feet were those old shoes. Dark brown, soft leather, patched once. I start with the sentence. If you ever get laughed at for something on your feet, remember you still have feet. And you can go farther than anyone who ever stood still to laugh at you. The room fell silent. Then the applause broke out. Not because of the shoes, but because they saw a real person who had gone through pain and chose to stand up with the same old values that were despised. The final lesson I learned, not about shoes but about value. Shoes don't define your dignity. And who laughs at you doesn't define who you are. Value is not in the pocket. It is in how you stand when people try to push you down. How to be silent when you could scream. How you choose to move on instead of coming back and banging on the door in retaliation. And how you remember every wound but don't let it paralyze you. True value is what remains after you strip away all the layers. Twisted justice isn't about revenge, it's about justice. When I titled this video, they laughed at my cheap shoes at the wedding, so I bought the venue they rented. I didn't just want to tell a gleeful tale of revenge. I wanted to chart a journey, from humiliation to resilience, from torn shoes to stage, from victim to storyteller. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes justice is walking with your head held high, knowing that no matter who has put you down, you don't need to bow down to be lifted up. For those who have been looked down upon, if you are watching this video in a cramped room wearing torn shoes or have ever been laughed at by someone because of your appearance, background, career, or dreams, listen to me. You are not small. You are not defeated. You are just not ready to bloom. I was you. And I stand here not to boast, but to say, you don't have to be someone else to be respected. You just have to be yourself. Conclusion, thank you to those who laughed. Sounds weird, but I'm grateful to those who laughed at me. Because without them, I wouldn't have learned to laugh last. Without them, I wouldn't have been so strong. And if they hadn't made fun of the shoes, I probably wouldn't have realized that they were the strongest gift my father left me. Who you are is not what you wear on your feet. It's how you keep walking, even when everyone is staring at you, waiting for you to fall. If you've made it this far, I want to tell you something from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Not just for following this story, but for taking the time to listen, to feel, and perhaps to reflect a part of yourself in each detail. Twisted Justice, each story is more than just entertainment. It's the voice of people who have been overlooked, dismissed, pushed to the edge, but have chosen to stand up and fight back in their own way. Maybe you've been laughed at for your old shoes, for your unappreciated job, for your unassuming background. Maybe you've been eliminated from the game just because you didn't fit the standards set by others. But you're not alone. Twisted Justice Channel exists to tell stories like this, not for revenge but to restore dignity. To tell the world that backhand index pointing right, those who look down on others for their looks, money, or status will eventually see the truth. Backhand index pointing right, and those who suffer silently if they don't fall will one day tell their stories with their heads held high. Bellhop bell, click subscribe if you also believe that justice doesn't have to be loud, but it will definitely come. Bell, click the notification bell so you don't miss stories that can make you cry with empathy, angry at injustice, and satisfied with the final twist. You never know, just one click of yours can be the motivation for us to continue telling more stories, giving more truths, and touching more hearts. Megaphone, do you have your own story? Leave a comment. Tell us who you overcame, what prejudices you overcame, and how you got to where you are today. Who knows, the next story on air might be yours. Thank you for being a part of this community. And remember, it doesn't matter how much they laughed at you. It matters how far you went after that laugh. Twisted justice. Justice isn't always gentle, but it's always timely. See you in the next video.